Hey guys, welcome back to more r/MaliciousCompliance Reddit stories. In this Ripestories video, imagine buying a beautiful abandoned estate in the mountains only to return and find a Karen and her family living inside, claiming they legally own it now. They dared me to take them to court, expecting a 5-year battle. But they did not realize that I had a secret weapon that would totally ruin them. Let's dive right into the video. The first one is from r/MaliciousCompliance and is titled, I bought an abandoned mountain property and came back to renovate and found a Karen family living inside. So for context, this whole mess started when I decided to buy a piece of property here in Peru. My parents are originally from South America and I spent a lot of my childhood visiting relatives there. I always had this dream of buying a quiet mountain getaway somewhere in the Sacred Valley region, not too far from Cusco. I wanted a place where I could look at the high peaks, breathe the fresh air, and escape the regular office grind for a few months out of the year. After saving up money for years, I finally found the perfect spot. It was an old abandoned mountain estate sitting on a few acres of terraced land. The property had a cute little house on it that had definitely seen better days. The roof was missing a bunch of tiles and the wooden windows were falling apart, and nature was slowly reclaiming the front yard. The previous owners had moved to Lima decades ago and just let the place sit. They did not care about it and nobody in the nearby town had touched it because everyone knew it belonged to an old family that would sue if anyone tried anything funny. I spent almost a full year dealing with the Peruvian legal system to buy this place, and if you've ever tried to buy real estate in a rural part of a foreign country, you know it takes a massive pile of paperwork. I had to hire a local real estate lawyer in Cusco to dig through old property registries, verify the titles, pay off years of back taxes that the previous owners had ignored, and get everything officially registered under my name with the National Property Registry, which is called SUNARP in Peru. It was a long, expensive process, but I wanted to make sure that everything was completely ironclad. I did not want any surprises down the road. Once the deed was officially stamped and registered in my name, I went out to the property, locked the old iron gate at the entrance with a heavy chain, and headed back home to wrap up my work contracts and save up more money for the massive renovation the house needed. Fast forward about 2 years, I'd finally managed to save up a solid renovation budget and cleared my schedule so I could spend a full 6 months in Peru managing the construction work myself. I packed my bags, booked my flights and rented a heavy-duty pickup truck at the Cusco airport so I could drive up to the mountains with my tools and initial supplies. I was incredibly excited. I was finally gonna turn this old beautiful ruin into my personal mountain sanctuary. The drive up into the mountains was beautiful, but as soon as I pulled up to the dirt road leading to my property, my excitement turned into complete confusion. The chain and padlock I'd left on the front gate were completely gone. Instead, the gate was wide open and there was a beat-up SUV parked right in the middle of my driveway. I stopped my truck right behind the SUV, feeling my heart starting to race. I got out of the car thinking maybe some local construction workers or neighbor had used the driveway to park, but as I walked up the stone pathway towards the main house, things got even weirder. The front yard, which had been overgrown with weeds and wild bushes 2 years ago, was now completely cleared. There were plastic lawn chairs scattered around, a clothesline hung between old 2 trees with laundry drying in the mountain breeze, and I could hear a television blasting from inside the house. I walked up to the front door, which had been replaced with a cheap new wooden door that definitely wasn't there before, and I knocked loudly. A few seconds later, the door swung open and I was face to face with a middle-aged woman. She had her hair pulled back tightly. She looked at me with an immediate expression of deep disgust, like I was some kind of annoying door-to-door salesman trespassing on her fancy estate. Before I could even open my mouth to ask who she was, she snapped at me in loud, aggressive Spanish. "What do you want? Who told you that you could just drive up our private road and park your ugly truck here?" I stood there for a second completely stunned by the sheer confidence of this woman. I blinked and replied in Spanish, keeping my voice as calm as possible. Sorry, but who are you? This is my private property. I bought this estate 2 years ago and I'm here to start renovating the house." The woman literally laughed out loud and she asked, "Your property? Are you insane or something? This house belongs to me and my family." We live here, you need to get back in your truck and leave right now before I call the cops on you for trespassing and harassing your family in their own home. At this point, a man who looked to be her husband and a guy in his early 20s, who I assumed was their son, came walking out of the living room to see what the commotion was about. They both crossed their arms and stood right behind the woman, glaring at me like they were ready to throw hands. "Look," I said, pulling out my phone, "I got the digital copies of my registered deed right here. My name is on the title. I bought this place legally from the previous owner, so you're living in my house." The husband stepped forward, scoffing. "We don't care about your stupid digital papers. Do you see this roof? We fixed the leaks. Do you see the yard? We cleared it. We've been living here for months and under Peruvian law, we have rights. It is called squatters' rights. We found this place abandoned, so we took possession of it. You cannot just show up after 2 years and tell us to leave." The woman, who was the definitive Karen of the family, chimed in with a smug smirk. "Exactly. We know the law. If you want us out, you cannot just kick us out. You have to go through the official eviction process. Go ahead and try to evict us. It takes years in this country to get an eviction through the courts. By the time you even get a court date, we will have been here long enough to claim full legal ownership through adverse possession. So why don't you go find a lawyer, waste thousands of dollars and enjoy waiting 5 years while we live in your beautiful house for free, huh?" The son smirked and nodded along with his mom, looking incredibly proud of themselves. And by the way, guys, I wish that would have been the moment that OP simply punched these people in the face, but unfortunately, that's seemingly not the way the story goes. However, if you enjoy these stories about entitled awful people stealing property, then please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much. So anyway, they truly believed that they had found the ultimate loophole and that they were completely untouchable. They were daring me to use the legal system because they knew how notoriously slow and awful the courts could be in Peru for standard eviction cases, and I realized right then and there that arguing with these people on the front porch was completely pointless. They were not gonna pack their bags and apologize. They were professional entitlement artists who had probably done this before. I looked at the Karen, looked at her husband and nodded. "Alright, you want me to try and evict you through the proper legal channels, huh? You want to play by the strict letter of the law? Fine, I will do exactly what you just told me to do." I turned around, walked back to my pickup truck and drove straight back down the mountain towards Cusco. And yeah, I was furious, but my brain was already spinning, trying to figure out how to handle this without spending the next 5 years of my life locked in a miserable legal battle. The next morning I walked into the office of the real estate lawyer who had helped me buy the property. Let's call him my legal advisor. I sat down in his office and explained this entire situation. I told him about the Karen, the husband, the son, and their proud declaration that I would have to spend years trying to legally evict them through the standard court system. My lawyer listened quietly, and when I finished talking, he didn't look worried at all. In fact, a slow, brilliant smile spread across his face. "They actually dared you to use the formal eviction law, huh?" my lawyer asked, leaning back in his chair. "Yes," I said. "They told me to go get a lawyer and try to evict them because they think it would take 5 years. Well," my lawyer chuckled, "they clearly think that they are dealing with old standard civil laws. They don't realize a few years ago, the Peruvian government got completely sick and tired of professional squatters stealing properties and dragging out court cases for years, and they passed a very specific, beautiful piece of legislation called Law Number 30201. It is commonly known as the Express Eviction Law or Desaloyo Express." I perked up immediately. "What does that mean?" "It means," my lawyer explained, "if a property owner has a fully registered title with SUNARP and the occupants have absolutely no legal contract or lease allowing them to be there, the owner does not have to go through the standard years-long civil lawsuit. Instead, we can file a special fast-track administrative and judicial request. Once the judge verifies that your title is real and that the squatters have zero documentation proving they have a right to be there, the judge is legally required to issue an immediate eviction order within a matter of weeks. There are no long trials, no endless appeals and no room for extensions. But then my lawyer's smile got even wider. And here's the best part, by the way, because they explicitly demanded that you follow the strict legal process for an eviction, we are gonna do exactly that. So basically, we will file for the express eviction, but under the strict wording of the law, when an official eviction notice is served, the occupants are given a very short formal window to either present a valid lease agreement or voluntarily vacate the premises before the police show up for a forced removal. If they ignore the notice or try to fight it without a real contract, the law dictates that the property owner is granted a police-enforced lockout and the squatters are held legally liable for every single penny of legal fees, court costs and property damages incurred during the process. I stared at my lawyer as the beautiful simplicity of the plan washed over me. Karen and her family had literally begged me to use the law against them, assuming the law was a slow, broken turtle. They had no idea that they had just jumped right in front of a legal freight train. "Let's do it," I said. "File the paperwork exactly according to the strict letter of the law." My lawyer spent the next couple days pulling our official registered titles, getting notarized copies of my deed, and drafting the express eviction petition. We filed it directly with the court that handled property disputes for that mountain district. So, because my paperwork was completely flawless and had been registered properly, the judge approved the initial request fairly quickly. Later, the Karen family was served with the eviction notice, and when Karen was handed the official legal paperwork, she didn't look scared at all. She barely even looked at the document, she just tossed it onto the lawn chair and laughed. "I told that stupid foreigner what that papers don't scare us," she repeatedly shouted. "We are staying right here. Tell him we will see him in court in a few years." She literally refused to read the paperwork. If she had looked at the text, she would have seen the giant bold letters at the top stating that this was an expedited action under Law 30201. She would have seen the specific clause stating they had exactly 5 business days to present a legally binding rental contract to the court or face immediate forcible removal by the national police. But because she was so blinded by her own arrogance and her belief that she knew how the system worked, she completely ignored it. She assumed it was just the first piece of paper in a legal battle that would just drag on for a decade. So then the 5 business days passed, the court registry showed absolutely zero response from the occupants. They had not filed a single document because obviously they did not have a single legal piece of paper to stand on. On the 6th day, the judge officially signed the final eviction order and authorized the use of public force. This meant the national police were now legally mandated to go up to the property, break the locks if necessary, and physically remove every single person inside and hand the keys back to me. A while later, my lawyer called me into his office to coordinate the final execution of the order. "All right," he said, looking over the signed police order. "The court has scheduled the eviction for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We have a squad of 10 national police officers secured to handle the removal." Now, under the strict regulations of the express eviction law, the property owner must provide a moving truck and a crew of laborers to safely remove the occupants' personal belongings from the house and place them on the public sidewalk outside the property boundary. The police are only there to remove the people and maintain order. Apparently, it is your responsibility to clear the structure. A beautiful, devious thought popped into my head and I said, "Wait a minute. The law says I have to move their stuff outside the property boundary?" "Yes," my lawyer said, "right outside the main gate on the side of the public dirt road." "And what happens to their stuff once it's on the sidewalk?" I asked. "Well," my lawyer replied, shrugging, "once it is on public property outside your boundaries, it's no longer your responsibility. The law states that the owner has fulfilled their duty by removing it safely from the premises. So whatever happens to it after that is between the squatters and the local municipality, and since this is a rural mountain road, there's no storage facility or holding area, it just sits there until they move it." I smiled. "Perfect, I will hire the biggest moving truck and a crew of 10 local guys. We'll follow the law to the absolute letter." The next morning, a caravan of vehicles assembled at the base of the mountain road. It consisted of 2 white police transport trucks carrying 10 heavily armed national police officers, my rented pickup truck, and a massive flatbed moving truck and a van carrying 10 strong local laborers I had hired for the day, along with a professional locksmith. We drove up the mountain road in a single file line. The morning sun was shining brightly over the valley and I couldn't help but feel a massive sense of anticipation. Today was the day I was getting my house back. When we pulled up to the entrance of the property, the scene inside the yard was completely quiet. The family's SUV was parked in the driveway and smoke was coming out of the chimney. They were probably inside having a nice cozy breakfast, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit them. The police trucks blocked the entrance of the driveway and the commanding officer got out of his vehicle and walked up to the front door, followed by 4 of his officers. I walked up behind them along with my lawyer and the locksmith, and the officer pounded on the wooden door with his heavy metal baton. The sound echoed across the quiet mountain valley. "National Police of Peru, open the door immediately. We have a judicial order for eviction." For a few seconds, there was dead silence inside the house, just like in MW2, and then we heard the sound of frantic footsteps and muffled shouting. The front door unlocked and cracked open, and the husband poked his head out, his eyes wide with absolute panic as he looked at the sea of police officers on his porch. "What is this? What's going on?" the husband stammered, his face turning completely pale. The commanding officer didn't waste any time though. He pushed the door open, stepped right into the house, and held up the signed judicial order. "Under law 30-201, you are occupying this property illegally. The 5-day grace period has expired and you have exactly 10 minutes to grab your wallets, phones and personal identification documents and step outside the property line. Everything else inside this house will be removed by the owner's crew. If you resist, you will be arrested immediately for obstructing justice." Right at that moment, the Karen came rushing out of the kitchen holding a spatula. When she saw the police officer standing in her living room, her face went from shock to completely enraged in a split second. She clearly had not learned her lesson yet. "What do you think you're doing?" she screamed at the top of her lungs, waving the spatula around. "You cannot do this. This is our house. We got squatters' rights. I told that stupid gringo to evict us properly. This is illegal. I'm gonna report all of you to your superiors." "You are being bribed by this foreigner." The commanding officer did not even blink. He looked at his men, gave a sharp nod. "Remove them." 2 officers grabbed Karen by her arms. She started kicking, screaming and dropping her spatula on the floor as they literally dragged her out of the front door. The husband and the son wise up real quick though when they saw 2 other officers reach for the handcuffs. They put their hands up and walked out voluntarily, looking completely humiliated. I watched from the front yard as the police marched the entire family down the stone pathway out of the main gate and forced them to stand on the dirt sidewalk right outside my property boundary. Karen was still screaming at the top of her lungs and her voice cracking as she hurled insults at me, the police, the judge and the entire country of Peru. And the family's bubble of absolute entitlement had been completely popped in front of everyone. Once the occupants were safely outside the gate, the commanding officer turned to me. "The structure is secure. You may begin the removal of property." I looked at my crew of 10 laborers and the driver of the flatbed truck, and I pointed towards the house. "Alright guys, you heard the officer, follow the law, exactly." Move everything out of the house and place it neatly on the public sidewalk outside the gate, and leave absolutely nothing inside. My crew cheered and rushed into the house with moving blankets, ropes and tools. What followed was one of the most satisfying hours of my entire life. The family had moved a massive amount of stuff into my house over the past few months. They had leather couches, a giant flat-screen TV, a massive wooden dining table, beds, dressers, clothing racks and boxes upon boxes of personal belongings. My crew worked like a well-oiled machine. They started carrying out the heavy furniture piece by piece, walking down the driveway and stacking it all neatly on the dirt sidewalk right next to where Karen and her family were standing under police supervision. The look on the Karen's face shifted from pure rage to absolute horror as she watched her entire life being dismantled and piled up on the side of a dusty mountain road. "Stop! Stop touching my things!" she whimpered, her voice losing all of its aggressive edge. She looked at me, her eyes practically begging, "Please, you can't just leave my expensive furniture out here in the dirt. It's gonna get ruined." "The dust, the sun, please give us a few days to find a truck." I walked over to the gate, standing just inside my property line, looking down at her. I channeled the exact same smug energy she had given me a week ago and said, "Hey, I'm just doing exactly what you told me to do. You told me to get a lawyer and evict you through the proper legal channel, so this is the legal channel. The law says I have to remove your stuff from my house and put it right here. I'm just being a law-abiding citizen." "Aren't you happy I listened to you?" The husband looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground, and the son was furiously typing on his phone, desperately trying to find a local moving company that could come up the mountain to save their stuff. But since we were in a rural area, it was gonna take hours for anyone to get there. Meanwhile, my crew was being incredibly thorough. They did not just move the furniture. They went into the kitchen and cleared out every single plate, cup, pot, pan. They went into the pantry and carried out boxes of cereal, bags of rice and half-used bottles of cooking oil, placing them neatly on top of the leather couches on the sidewalk. They went into the bathroom and brought out the toothbrushes, the towels and the half-empty bottles of shampoo. And by the time the clock hit 11 AM, the house was completely empty. My crew had even swept the floors. Outside the gate, the public dirt sidewalk was completely blocked by a massive mountain of household goods. There was a giant refrigerator sitting next to a pile of mattresses, with a mountain of clothing boxes stacked on top of a dining table. It looked like a surreal outdoor garage sale, but the malicious compliance was not even done yet. As my crew wrapped up, the commanding officer walked over to me with a final legal document for me to sign, confirming that the property had been successfully restored to its rightful owner. As I signed the paper, the officer looked over at the family's SUV parked in my driveway. "Is that vehicle yours?" the officer asked. "No," I replied with a massive grin, "that belongs to the people outside." Under the eviction order, the officer stated, all foreign property must be cleared from the premises. If they don't remove the vehicle immediately, we will have to call a police impound tow truck from Costco, which will cost them a very heavy fine and impound fees too. I looked out the gate at the husband and said, "Hey, the officer says you need to move your car out of my driveway right now or it's getting impounded." The husband frantically reached into his pockets, pulled out his car keys, and walked up to the driveway under the watchful eye of a cop, and he got into the SUV, started the engine, and backed it out of the gate. But here was the problem though, the dirt road was narrow and the massive pile of their own furniture was completely blocking the sidewalk and half of the drivable road right outside the gate. The husband had to awkwardly park the SUV halfway in a ditch further down the road, completely trapping them there with their mountain of stuff. Once the car was out, my locksmith immediately went to work. He removed the cheap door lock the family had installed and replaced it with a heavy-duty, high-security commercial lock, and then we walked down to the main entrance gate and my crew took a massive hairy iron chain, wrapped it around the gate and secured it with an industrial padlock. The commanding officer turned to the family, pointing a stern finger at them. "The eviction is officially complete. The property is now under the private possession of the owner. If any of you step 1 foot past this iron gate, you will be arrested on the spot for criminal trespass and felony breaking and entering. Do you understand?" The Karen, completely crushed, defeated, and covered in a fine layer of mountain dust from the passing cars, just stared at the ground and gave me a weak nod. She had gone from queen of the mountain to a literal roadside attraction in less than 2 hours. The police officers got back into their trucks and drove back down the mountain, leaving the family stranded on the side of the road with their massive pile of furniture. I paid my moving crew, gave them all a massive tip for their amazing work, and watched as they drove away in their van. My lawyer walked up next to me and said, "Don't forget, we still have one final legal step to take tomorrow." "Oh, really?" I asked. "What is that?" "Under the law," my lawyer explained with a devious smirk, "the losing party is completely responsible for all legal costs. So tomorrow morning I will file a formal, itemized assessment with the judge, and we will bill them for the legal fees, the court filing costs, the price of the locksmith, the rental of the flatbed truck, and the hourly wages of all 10 laborers we hired today. The court will issue a direct garnishment order until every single soul is paid back to you." I couldn't help but laugh out loud. The Karen and her family had literally begged me to use the law against them, completely convinced that they could exploit a slow system to live in luxury for free. And well, they got what they wanted. I spent the rest of the afternoon sitting on my front porch, drinking a cold bottle of local Peruvian beer and watching the sunset over the beautiful mountain peaks. The house was a total mess and needed a massive amount of renovation work, but as I looked down at the empty driveway and the heavy lock on my front gate, I knew every single second of the struggle had been worth it. So to the entitled Karen who dared me to try and evict her, thanks for the great legal advice. It worked out perfectly for me. Edit, for the people asking, I got all the money back that I was owed by this awful entitled family, and in the end, and maybe the court system in Peru is not so bad after all. And yeah guys, this is yet another perfect example of play stupid games, win stupid prizes. They literally dared you, OP, to evict them because they thought they could exploit a notoriously slow legal system to then steal your property and live rent-free for 5 years. But let's be clear here, they were not some poor struggling family down on their luck. They were professional entitled scammers who knew exactly what they were doing, and they got caught. The fact that they had to pay for the moving crew, the locksmith and everything is just awesome. So yeah, OP, enjoy your mountain home. You certainly earned it if you ask me. Also guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this story. And a user in the comments said, the most unhinged part of this whole story is that they genuinely thought squatter rights was some kind of magic spell that would make them invincible. Like they actually believed that saying those 2 words would make a judge just shrug and say, "Welp, them's the rules." The confidence of people who have absolutely no idea how the law works will never cease to amaze me. And another person in the comments said, as someone who has actually lived in Costco for 3 years, I can confirm that the Peruvian legal system is indeed a nightmare, but it's also completely unpredictable. Sometimes you can wait forever for a standard case or get lucky with the right judge. And yeah, OP got extremely lucky with Law 30201, which most people don't even know exists. The fact that this lawyer recognized the opportunity and executed it perfectly is honestly impressive. For any foreigners thinking about buying property in Peru though, do your research first. And guys, now we will continue with a set of extremely entertaining malicious compliance stories, which we have read before in the past, however some of you might not have heard them before. And it would be a shame if you missed out on them. So here we go. So I have been living in my neighborhood for well over 2 decades, so essentially my entire life. I'm living in the same house that I grew up in, and because of my long history here, I'm pretty well acquainted with all the neighbors. Of course, I would not really say that we are friends, but we greet each other when we pass on the street or by each other's houses, occasionally drop off gifts or offerings for the holidays, and help each other when we need it. Everyone is generally friendly with each other, and I don't hear much drama other than the occasional family drama, as we all mainly just keep to ourselves. My next door neighbor was a sweet family of 5. They had a bunch of chihuahuas and their kids would always be outside playing with the dogs. I remember one time they chased me. Chihuahuas are tiny, but so was I, and I was scared for my life. The couple was relatively young when I was a kid, and as I got older, I would get closer with them. I would talk mostly about fishing to the father, as I knew he was a big fishing guy. The family was generally nice and pleasant to be around. They moved out of the neighborhood about 4 years ago. The house was up for sale for a long time until finally another family bought it 2 years ago. It was a small family this time, only 2 kids and no dogs. I'm a person who likes to keep to themselves, so I'm not the type to introduce myself to neighbors. I just kept to myself, occasionally greeting the neighbors when I saw them to welcome them into the neighborhood, but nothing more than that. And apparently, it was a good thing that I kept my distance, because around 2 months into the family being here, I began to hear my neighbors talking trash about the people who live there. I keep to myself, yes, but I am nosy, so I asked my neighbors for some of the details. The complaints were centered around the wife, who we will call Karen. The neighbors across from me are Mexican, and they had a quinceañera for their daughter. It is a party, so of course it's gonna be a little loud. Personally, I was not really bothered by it, and neither were any of the other neighbors, so I heard. But Karen had called the police on them, complaining about the noise. Luckily, the police were nice and just told them to watch their noise levels. I thought that it might have been a one-off incident. After all, the party could have been loud after all, and maybe I just tuned out the noise because I'm used to living here. But after that, I started hearing more about Karen causing chaos around the neighborhood. As the typical stereotype of her namesake, she would complain incessantly about the most minor things, and very soon she became the talk of the neighborhood. I tried not to involve myself in the drama, reserving my opinions on Karen to myself, but I heard a lot of stories and decided that it would be better to avoid Karen to spare myself the trouble. Of course, I would continue to wave and things like that just to keep up the peace, but as for full-length conversations, I would try to avoid it as much as possible, but as my luck would have it, the trouble found me instead. Karen and I share a fence. We have not had problems before, but one day while I was out relaxing on my porch, Karen leaned over and began talking to me. She demanded that I move my fence so that she could expand her flower garden. She did not even try starting with small talk, she just jumped straight to the point, which in my opinion is a bit tacky and rude. Like, come on, at least pretend like you care first before asking for what you want. Anyways, I told her honestly that I believed that the request was extremely odd and that moving the fence would have her end up encroaching on my own property. She tried claiming that it was in fact me who was encroaching on her land and that she was simply trying to claim what was rightfully hers. I tried to counter by saying that the previous family had no problem with the placement of the fence and that our yards were split so that they were equal in length. She replied that she was not the previous family and that they were probably a bunch of pushovers. On behalf of the family, I felt genuinely offended and told her that the answer was no. I returned inside because I didn't want to deal with her yapping. I thought that would be as I had already told her no, and because it was such an odd request, but the next day when I came back from work, she approached me again, asking about it once more. Seriously? Does this woman feel no shame? And to answer for OP here, no, these people feel no shame, that's for sure. The answer was no, of course, so once again I told her no, and that is when, to my shock, she threatened to sue me, saying she would do everything to prove that the land was actually hers. I just ignored her, but I was genuinely flabbergasted by the length that she was going to for just a sliver of land. However, her words did get me a little worried. If it turned out that the property was legally hers, I would be in big trouble if her threats were not empty. I debated what to do for a bit, even talking it out with my parents and my friends to get as many opinions as possible, but ultimately I decided to conduct a property survey so I could get some peace of mind. I hired a land surveyor to check it out for me, making sure to choose a day where I knew Karen would be gone, as I didn't want her to know what I was up to. No doubt she would make an insanely big deal about it. The land surveyor did his job well, and the results were not what I was expecting. I expected the land to be evenly split right down where the fence was right now, but it wasn't. So, it turns out my land was a little bigger for whatever reason, so some of her property was actually technically mine. I did not know what to do with this information and I kept it to myself for a while. Well, I ultimately decided that I would show it to Karen, hoping that it would settle the dispute and hopefully get Karen to calm down. I requested a copy of the survey from the land surveyor. I decided that I would not show it to Karen until she came up to me asking about it. I think I secretly hoped for her to just forget about the entire thing, but of course she didn't. I did not have to wait for long though. A week after I received the results of the land survey, Karen came up to me asking if I had considered her offer. This is when I decided to show the results of the survey. I explained to her that I decided to conduct a property survey to set things straight, trying not to attack her, and I told her that the fence was already settled on my property, so therefore the land was not hers and I was not trespassing on any property by having the fence where it currently was. And therefore she had no grounds to sue me. Karen scoffed and said that my property survey was clearly a fake and that I was trying to trick her to get away from the lawsuit. It is an insane pet peeve of mine when people tell me that I'm lying when I'm actually not, and I kept trying to insist that it was not a fake, but to no avail. Well, still, I was wishful and I thought that this would finally deter her from bothering me, but no, I had to be wrong. She continued bothering me about this fence. Day in and day out, she approached me. I'm not even kidding, she accosted me every single day asking whether I would change my mind and reminding me that she would sue if I didn't bring in the fence. I finally had enough and I decided it would be time to take action. Since Karen refused to accept the property survey, I would move the fence where it actually belonged, claiming back all the land that was mine. I had a contractor move the fence while Karen and her family were away, which ultimately sliced Karen's garden right in half. I tried not to destroy her plants or anything. I'm not cruel enough to do that, but I knew that it would really bother her. It did. When Karen came back, she stormed to my door, shouting all sorts of obscenities about how she was gonna sue me for what I did. I told her that I was just moving the property line to where it should be, since she was so worried about the true borders beforehand. We went back and forth for a little bit before Karen finally returned to her house. A few days later I was served a lawsuit. I honestly expected it, but it amazed me, once again, just how far Karen would go for a little more space in her garden. I mean seriously, putting in the time, effort and money just for a little bit of land? I have to appreciate her dedication to the cause. Although I was annoyed that Karen was not letting this go, I decided to go along with it anyway because I already knew that I was in the right. I did not want to get a lawyer, as it would be a pretty easy case to win, and I did not want to spend my money like that, so I just went along with the one from Legal Aid. Karen sued me for property destruction and trespassing, claiming I was encroaching on her land. I presented the land survey showing that the area I moved the fence to was my own, and therefore Karen had no right to sue me. It was a relatively short case, literally just a day, and the court ruled in my favor. I did not want to put in the effort of moving the entire fence back, and I was getting used to the expanded yard space, so I kept the fence where it was. However, I made a small section for Karen's garden so she could have it back in full. It looked weird for a while, but I didn't care. Karen did not bother me after that. Finally, it was all over. I was a little worried now that I was a new enemy of Karen's, but honestly, so was the entire neighborhood, so at least I was not alone in my struggles. A month after the court case concluded, I saw a moving truck outside her house. I watched as they loaded the truck and left swiftly. I did not ask them anything about it, but I was curious, so I asked my neighbors instead because they are pretty big gossipers. And apparently it was because of me that she moved away. Well, it was not just because of me, because numerous people had been bothered by Karen's antics and she was receiving many negative complaints from our neighbors. When she sued me and lost the lawsuit, she felt so embarrassed and, I guess, done with the neighborhood that she moved out. Frankly, I don't mind, she was really a nuisance and now our neighborhood is in relative peace. I decided to keep the extended property line for now. Also, if anyone decides that they want more room in their yard, I will move the fence back to where it was before this whole mess started. By the way, Karen's place is still up for sale. I just hope that whoever moves in here next is nice. And yeah guys, let's hope you will never have a neighbor like Karen. That is worse than having a terrible enemy. Either way, the next one is an amazing malicious compliance story that you don't want to miss. And by the way, please don't forget to like the video because that helps me tremendously in fighting back against the AI algorithm. So this happened decades ago, but after reading another MC, I figured I would post this. So I was a manager of a programming department. I initially had 5 programmers reporting to me and I was able to spend half my time programming and half of it managing. I'd always gotten exceeds or far exceeds expectations on my annual reviews. About 10 years later, my team had 25 people and I was spending less and less time programming. Fast forward a few years and I missed 2 months during the year for a surgery and hospital stay, and in my annual review my boss, who knew nothing about programming, told me that I was not doing a good job and the programming department was missing deliverable dates, probably because I was in the hospital. They wanted me to go back to just programming and I was stripped of my manager and only focus on programming. I was pissed off, but I told him that I can do that. So then I told my former staff what had happened and told them to direct all questions to my boss, who knew zero about programming. He was overwhelmed and soon senior management figured out that my boss was the problem and not me. They ended up canning him and replaced him with the VP of programming in the UK. I'm in the US. She was great since she started as a programmer and was an excellent boss in general. Since I was just a programmer now, all of the managers were in the UK and I told my former staff to direct all questions to their new bosses in the UK. Since there was a 6-hour time difference and we only overlapped 2 or 3 hours each day, that made getting questions answered in a timely fashion quite difficult. In the meantime, my health was not the best and my doctor told me I should go to a 4-day/32-hour work week so my health would not continue to suffer. Since my employer was a strict 40-hour work week company, I looked for another job and got 8 job offers in about a month. I was ready to resign. Finally, after a few months, my new boss asked me to be a manager again because of the time difference between US and UK and because I am most experienced as a programmer in the company. But instead, I gave her my resignation and then explained why. She asked me what it would need to get me to stay and I told her I wanted a 10% raise and wanted to work 4 days/a 32-hour work week. I gave her 24 hours to respond, she spoke to higher-ups and finally came back the next day and agreed. Fire me for driving too fast at 15 kilometers per hour and then tell me to drive back to the district office? You got it, boss. And by the way, that's around 9 miles per hour for our American viewers. So this is gonna be kind of a long one, but I have a malicious compliance and a pro-revenge in one story. A friend reminded me of this when talking about all the forest fires burning in Canada right now. In the late 80s, I got a job with the Ministry of Natural Resources driving to support fighting forest fires. It was a great job, just over double minimum wage, a major bonus at 19, and they had no limit to the number of hours you could work. Fire season started early and by mid-May I was supporting one that was, I think a long time ago, 300 to 400 hectares and growing quickly. 1 hectare is around 2.5 acres by the way. Back then, I think the whole district was around 100 square kilometers, think all of Indiana, so there was a lot of driving. One day I get to the on-site HQ and get told to wait while they found me a return load. A little later, I'm told to go to the helicopter staging area to pick up the fire boss, FB. To preface, the road was crap. I pick him and a few others up and make my way back. Halfway there, I hit a deep pothole and the FB just loses it. Starts bellowing about damn kids speeding, no respect, etc. and for the 5 minutes it takes to get back. I found out on the way there that going too fast was not a good deal, so I made sure to not go faster than 15 kilometers per hour, aka 9 miles per hour. As soon as we get to base camp, slams his way out of the truck and screams, "You're fired! Get back to district and have them process you." Okay, F you very much, sir. We were deep in the bush. I don't know how deep, but it took me close to 7 hours to get there. So, cue the malicious compliance. I grabbed two 20-liter gas cans, 5 gallons, and set off. Real slow. If 15 kilometers per hour was too fast for these roads, then the proper speed was obviously however fast the truck went at idle. Unless there was a hill, I wasn't a monster. It took 22 hours to reach the first paved road, and then I set the cruise control 5 kilometers per hour below the speed limit and went to get fired. An extra $300-ish, hear me. I process out and I meet one of the guys, call him crew boss CB, who taught the level 1 forest firefighter course I took before I got hired to drive. We got along well, but there are only 2 new full-time hires that year and none on his crew. He had just come with one of his guys who broke his leg and was going to personnel to find someone new. I was quickly hired on as his 4th. 2 hours later, I'm being driven to meet his crew at a fire. The couple says later that the fire is declared out and we are off to a new fire. Yep, the fire I was fired from. Kind of revenge-ish, but it gets better. So cue the pro-revenge. CB, it turns out, is besties with FB, so FB has our crew as the initial response crew. This meant that we spent a lot of time riding in the helicopter with FB and responding to jump fires that would take minimal time to deal with. It took a week before he recognized me, and I watched out the corner of my eye, something I thought was only in books or is said as an exaggeration. This guy went from pink to red to actually turning purple. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I see the skittle flowing out as he yelled into the headset, and I got some major side-eye from CB for the rest of the flight. When CB asked about it later and I explained, including the drive back, he almost passed out. It turns out, surprise, FB has a long history of exploding over nothing and taking it out on the nearest poor idiot. He ended up firing 2 more guys over the same thing and likely the same pothole. So yeah, CB knew what he was like, but they got along really well. It turns out he also really liked poking the bear. For the rest of that fire, CB made sure I was seated, so I was the first person he saw if he looked over his shoulder. On a later fire, our crew got admin duties and CB was FB's number 2. I got to be, as CB put, his helper monkey and FB's jock itch. The rest of the crew knew, so there wasn't any friction, and they got a kick out of it. It was a great summer, and I worked for CB 3 more summers through university. Always went back with great stories, really nice money. I collected unemployment during school, not sure if it was legal, but no one said anything, and pretty sure time has run out anyway, in amazing shape but with a really weird tan. And yeah guys, if you enjoy these malicious compliance stories, please don't forget to like the video and let me know in the comments. It would be awesome if we could reach 1000 likes, because that would help me tremendously. The next one is the title story, which is titled, "You Want Me to Quit? Okay, company immediately collapses." So for the last 10 years, I've been working from home as an automation engineer for a relatively small company that produced custom-built industrial gas treatment units. Industrial chillers, compressor stations, that sort of thing. My job was to write algorithms for PLCs, design HMI, and setting up data transfer for customers' SCADA systems. Basically, I was the person who told machines what to do. I was getting significant below market pay for such a position, but with only 4 to 5 projects per year and each taking me 2 to 3 weeks to complete, I was not arguing, since I was getting paid for mostly doing nothing, and I was fortunate enough to have considerable passive income thanks to lucky investments of my inheritance. So everything was great until a couple of years ago when the owner decided to retire and sell the company. So here comes the new management with new policies. So in my country, every worker is entitled to at least 4 weeks of paid vacation time per year, and all unspent vacation is rolled over to the next year, but you have to take at least 2 uninterrupted weeks per year. So if you only take your mandatory vacation, you accumulate 14 additional days per year. And by the way guys, I'm curious, how much paid vacation time are you entitled to where you live? Let me know in the comments, I'm really curious. Given how much free time I actually had, I rarely used more than mandatory 2 weeks per year, always making sure that there be no commissioning or maintenance planned during my vacation. During these events, I would remotely access maintenance engineer's laptop to make necessary adjustments to the algorithms, so everything works perfectly in real working conditions. But one of the first policies new management implemented was schedule-based vacations. So now I had to decide when I take my 2 weeks at the start of the year. I chose the first weeks of April. April. In early March, I get a call from manager of the development team who asks me to come on a quick 3-day work trip to help maintenance engineers switch PLC and upload new project. Well, apparently thanks to a new maintenance team manager, a lot of maintenance engineers quit and they are short-staffed, and the only one they can send at the moment is bad with a computer. There isn't much for me to do since we had identical stations going through the same PLC switch month prior, so I will just fly there, chill until the electrical panel is rewired, new PLC is installed, and when I just upload new project to PLC and fly home. I thought for myself and agreed to go. Apparently maintenance engineer not only bad with computers but also knows nothing about electrical work, so I had to do everything myself, which I'm not actually qualified to do, but at this point I don't want to disappoint the client, who turned out to be a bunch of really nice people, so after a week and with only 3 burnt down fuses, I finished. After returning home, I informed my manager what I'm not going to any more business trips since I don't get paid enough to also do maintenance engineer's work. First day of my vacation comes and I get another call. Despite my poor judgment, I decided to answer. "Hey, we need you to go on another business trip starting next Monday. It will just take a week for this project." I said, "I'm not familiar with that project. It was done while I was on paternity leave. In my country, either parent can take paternity/maternity leave up to 3 years, and after the first 6 months, my wife asked me to switch. Yeah, we had to contract a specialist to do that project while you're on leave. I will send it to you along with documentation right away." And then it disconnects. I checked the received project and it is huge. 7 PLCs, 6 HMI panels, everything has to work as a single system, and the project is a total mess. Nothing would work, you just have to do everything from scratch. It will probably take me close to a month to finish. And that is with doing everything from the comfort of my own home, where I am more productive. So I call back and I said, yeah, I looked at this project and that's a mess. It's not in the working condition and no way to finish it in a week. I'll do what I can do, but as I said last time, I am doing it remotely as always. I won't go on another business trip, especially now. I have too many things planned for the next few weeks. I cannot go. But reception on site is terrible. You won't be able to access it remotely. And we already missed all deadlines on this project. The client is pissed and we are looking at huge fines. The CEO is breathing down my neck. We need it fixed yesterday. Then I will email the maintenance engineer project with changes each evening once he's in the hotel with decent reception, and he can email me a list of things what needs fixing. It's not the first time we've done it that way. Okay, I hear you. I will have to speak with the CEO about it. About 50 minutes later, I get another call. The CEO says, "If you don't want to go, you should just write a resignation letter." I'm the only employee who knows how to do my job, but yeah, sure. I will send my resignation letter right away. I was thinking about not doing it, so they had to terminate me and pay me termination compensation, but when I decided to be petty in a different way, in my country you had to give at least 2 weeks notice, unless both parties agreed to shorter notice. So I write my letter and set my resignation day as 14th of April, which is 2 weeks. Shortly after, it gets approved. The deed is done. And then I get another call a bit later. "So, will you be able to finish this project before you leave?" "I won't be able to do any work on that project before I leave." "What? Why? You still have 2 weeks and we really need it done." "Well, you see, I'm on vacation right now. The last day of my vacation will be April 13th and I'm resigning on the 14th. So the fallout was the following. I recently got a message from an ex-colleague I have friendly relationships with, and apparently the company is in deep crap right now. Deadlines were missed, fines rolled in, and the company's accounts have been frozen. They even were unable to pay salaries for the last 2 months. They are now toast and they will have to file bankruptcy. Don't worry, people will get paid in the end. In my country, salary debts have the highest priority when bankrupt businesses sell their assets. The downside? I still have not received my compensation for my 120 saved vacation days. And yeah guys, if you've ever worked in a terrible company like this and have gotten malicious compliance, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your story. The next one is a super emotional story about not being allowed to bring a service animal to a wedding. It is titled, "Am I the jerk for not allowing my friend to bring her service animal, aka guide dog, to my wedding?" So I, 28 female, will be getting married in September. I have a blind friend who mostly relies on her guide dog. The dog obviously has access rights to all places. Now I'm in a sticky situation though, and I can sense that I will be the a-hole here. I have 3 chronic illnesses that I take 23 pills a day for, severe asthma, and you guessed it, an extremely severe dog allergy. Usually when I meet with my friend we meet in the open and I take 2 allergy pills. However, because of all the other medication I take, these pills make me extremely drowsy to the point where I'm officially not allowed to drive and I usually crash as soon as I get home from our get-togethers. Our wedding will be very intimate, in other words, we'll be in relatively small rooms. I feel horrible about this, but I don't think I can let my friend bring her dog. It just wouldn't work. I talked about it with my fiancé and some friends. So finally, I talked to my friend about it, explained the situation and said I would love her to come, but she cannot bring her dog. I said that 4 of our mutual friends had offered to be on a roster and assist her should she need it. Alternatively, if she's not comfortable with this, she could bring a person of her choosing to the wedding, or I would pay for a professional aid for the day. I think it's important to note that her dog is not for any additional issues like seizures or anything like that. Unfortunately, she was less than happy with my suggestions. She accused me of being ableist and thinking her disability can be switched off for the day. I understand what I asked was a lot and it's a difficult topic. I told her to tell me if she changes her mind and I would be happy to make arrangements. And yeah, Ripestars, let me know in the comments, do you think that OP was the a-hole here for not budging on this topic? And was OP maybe even being ableist? I'm curious what you have to say about this. Comment number 1 said, not the a-hole. I was so ready to label you an a-hole after reading the title, but I think you have extenuating circumstances for not wanting a service dog or any dog at your wedding. I can also understand why your friend would be upset. This probably is not the first time someone has tried to stop her from bringing her service dog somewhere. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. I think this is just a misunderstanding. Your chronic illnesses and allergy are a disability too. I can understand why your friend would be opposed to going out without the guide she's used to, and I also get that you wouldn't want to be asleep or severely drowsy on your wedding day. I would talk to your friend more and see if any of the solutions you mentioned could work, or see if either of you could come up with more options. I feel bad for you and your friend. This is a difficult situation. Comment number 3, hey, disabled person here, there's actually a name for the situation you're describing. It's called conflicting access needs. And for example, I have photosensitivity, so I do a lot better in dark rooms. But when it's dark, it's also hard to lip read. So yeah, there's a lot of writing by disabled people on navigating conflicting access needs. Maybe some of this would help you. Good luck. It's probably hitting some buttons for your friend because there's a lot of ableism service dog handlers have to deal with. So it might be kind of a knee-jerk reaction, sort of like how I feel when people suggest I try yoga or something. Update, some of you may remember my post. Well, since then, I've gotten married. We decided to get married sooner than we planned because the situation was good where we live and we didn't want to risk having to cancel if the numbers spike. Before, I took your advice and called my friend though. I explained how severe my allergies are once again and told her how I really want to be able to enjoy my wedding day. I apologized for making suggestions and not simply asking her, and said she is welcome to bring up any ideas that would help her being able to attend. She told me she still wanted to, that do not include her dog. She was adamant that it was her dog or nothing. While disappointed, I was prepared for that and told her that would not be possible and that she will be missed at the wedding. We sent out the new invitations with the new date and simply didn't invite her, so technically she was not uninvited. Some of our mutual friends that are in the wedding told me that she had asked them not to attend in solidarity, but luckily they all thought that was ridiculous. Oh wow guys, and by the way, I've never heard of something like that before. Why would you ask people to not attend a wedding just out of solidarity? That makes absolutely no sense in this case. Anyway, we had a beautiful wedding and spent our honeymoon in the Flinders Ranges, which I can only recommend. As for my friend, I'm open to reconciliation, but she will have to make the first step. So that's it. While it did not go as I hoped it would, I'm still in a happy place now, enjoying my life as a married woman. Commenter number 1, yes, you are an a-hole. Your friend was wrong to try to sabotage your wedding, but you asked a person with a disability and a service dog to not bring the dog. You actually are in violations of the Americans with Disability Act. A service dog has the legal right to go anywhere the handler goes, and I once called the police on a restaurant that was refusing to allow a service dog, citing health laws. Trying to explain the requirements for service dogs, they still refused. The police intervened and the individual and I had a lovely dinner. Apologies are needed from both sides. Then OB responded, this was not in the US and it was not a public place. And by the way guys, that was a beautiful way to shut down you are the a-hole comment. Props to OP. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. After finishing the academic season with decent exam results, a long summer and a good college was just around the corner. This was only topped by the big party I was planning for my birthday next week. The days leading up to the party flew by, and it was here before I knew it. My parents, being the socialites that they are, could not stop themselves from going overboard, inviting every family member, friend and neighbor to an already crowded household. My dad then brought his tuned 1964 Shelby Daytona supercar out from the garage. Which was weird because he was usually quite protective of it. To my surprise, he had decided to pass it down to me as a birthday and graduation present, giving me a great incentive to start my driving lessons as well. And yeah, Ripestars, by the way, that seems like a great first car for a new driver. Anyway, I was over the moon and my friends were jealous as hell. Many people swarmed around to get a good look at the car, but their interest dropped when the pizza delivery arrived. Returning to the yard after eating, I noticed the door was open and I thought I saw someone sitting inside, and I assumed it was my dad until I spotted him in the kitchen. Going back outside, I found it was our neighbor Karen, who was oblivious to my approach until I gave a not so subtle cuff. Karen had not been invited to the party, which she knew as well, but still presumed to make herself at home even in my new car. Karen jumped and then turned to glare at me like I had purposefully snuck up to scare her. I thought to quickly change the subject by mentioning how nice the car was, which she agreed as she rubbed her sweaty palms across the dashboard. As more people began to exit the house, she took her cue to leave. I locked the car soon after. While I was helping to tidy up the party mess, my parents told me that they wanted to take a week to go see my aunt a few states over, asking me to stay and watch the house. I obliged, having no reason to give up a week of my summer when it could be spent with the house to myself. I was tinkering with the car on the next morning as they packed their bags, eager to get familiar with my new vehicle. Some time passed by before a voice interrupted me. I closed the hood expecting my mom, but instead I found Karen facing me. To my surprise, I must have been too focused to notice my parents leaving earlier. Before I could speak up, Karen turned her attention to the car, running her hand along it as she talked. It turns out that she was the person who sold the car to my dad, though it was quite obvious she still felt quite attached to it. When I proudly exclaimed that my dad had given it to me as a birthday present, she snapped back at me, swearing that she was still the rightful owner because it was not done properly or whatever that meant. The conversation hung on awkwardly after that until she excused herself and I went back into the house. I was starting to wonder whether a week alone was such a good idea after all. And well, my mom called me later to tell me that they got to the place safely, and I told them about Karen's visit and they were not pleased. My dad explained that she was forced to sell some items to pay off a court order, though he warned me not to mention it as she could get very annoyed about it. I played off my worries so they did not need to end their trip early and steeled myself to a few more days. I pulled myself out of bed after not much sleep as some hoodlum had been driving fast around the block late into last night. I pulled apart the curtains as I yawned, interrupted by the sight of my empty driveway. As I panicked outside, I suddenly caught it from the corner of my eye. My Shelby Daytona on Karen's driveway. Getting closer, I saw tread marks from the road leading up to the car, and inside the keys still in the ignition. The realization hit me hard. Karen was the hoodlum cruising around last night in my damn car. I saw the door open as I jumped into the seat and took the car home, followed closely by the thief. Karen started in outrage, but when she noticed my own emotions boiling over, she changed to a softer tone of petty excuses. She said that I had left the keys inside, so she moved it to keep it safe. I scoffed loudly and asked if she took it for a spin, knowing her interest in the car since my birthday. She denied it immediately, though averted her gaze after. I went inside, ignoring her pleas. I did not trust her one bit, and my suspicions were quickly confirmed by my doorcam footage. I hated the idea that she stole it, but at least I now had proof. 2 blissfully quiet days passed by before I saw her again, only by chance as I was grabbing a snack from the fridge. As if the woman had not learned her lesson from last time, she was opening the car door, head swiveling suspiciously like a comically obvious criminal. I ran outside to stop her, catching her just before she fell onto the seat. Karen darted to her feet and scurried back to the curb before turning to confront me. This time her mood was dark. While I was the only one who had a right to be angry about the situation, it was not hard for her to twist it until she was the victim, claiming that I'd been intimidating and harassing a harmless, nice old lady like her. I asked her again about her joyride, which she denied again without apology, though she did seem to sour a bit after I told her about the video footage I had. She demanded that I hand over the tapes because I was illegally recording her, though it only pointed to my own driveway. When I refused, she threatened to call the cops, and I let her as I did not feel like I had anything to worry about. After Karen called the cops, she refused to let me leave her side in case I made a run for it, apparently. I was seriously starting to doubt her sanity or mental capacity by this point, and I could see why I was warned from getting into it with her. Half an hour of a menacing staring contest later, help arrived in the form of 2 uniformed officers who pulled up nearby. Without so much as a hello, Karen launched herself at the 2 men, listing everything that had happened today while I sat patiently. Karen claimed that I had stolen her car and then threatened her when she tried to take it back, which I protested, but all it achieved was a shouting match no one could understand. In a moment to catch my breath, Karen scoffed at me because of my age, saying that I was too young to own a car, which they initially seemed to believe. Leading one of the officers to my house, I showed them my ID, birth certificate and driver's license. Without the noisy one present, I was able to calmly explain and apologize to the issue. I was also able to show them the camera footage of the theft in action, which they seemed to be quite resolved about. Back outside, the officers compared notes as Karen glared at me smugly. The cops decided to dismiss the issue as I could prove ownership, which she was furious about. Before they turned to leave, I told them I want to press charges over the issue and happy for us both to go to the precinct to answer their questions. Karen's fury turned to me after that, calling me a slimy little crap and shouting in my face. When one of the officers tried to intervene, she lashed out wildly and smashed a wing mirror of the car before attempting to just storm off. The cops grabbed her before she reached her driveway. She was hauled into the back of the police car, kicking and screaming like a mountain lion, though she could do little else to resist them, and into the car she went. Eventually, Karen has pled innocence until the footage was brought up, at which point she admitted everything. All in all, Karen ended up going to jail for this, which I feel is very much deserved. I also got a restraining order against her, so she can never mess with my car again. And the next one is another malicious compliance story, and it is titled "Spent All Night Swapping Parts Just Because That Is What They Wanted." So this happened in the early 2000s, working at a now defunct airline. Airplane came in for overnight work with an inoperative boost pump, and these were new airplanes, which were also a new type to the company. I had this problem before, so I had a hunch that it was a bad relay. I pulled a wiring prints and find where the other relay with the same part number is, and proceed to swap the suspect relay with a known good one. The problem followed the bad relay, so in less than 10 minutes I knew what the fix would be. Order up a new relay from the stores, and now the supervisor comes around and says maintenance control want the boost pump swapped for troubleshooting. I plead my case, telling him it is fixed as soon as a new relay arrives, but he said he wanted them swapped anyway. I get paid by the hour, so whatever, I swap the pumps around and the problem is still there. Now, since serial numbers are tracked on where they are installed on the aircraft, I swap both pumps back to their original position. I then go in and tell the supervisor problem was not fixed and grab the relay I ordered earlier, replace the relay, and all ops checks are good. As I am walking back into the office to sign it off, the supervisor meets me walking through the hangar with the exact wiring print I had printed up earlier and wants me to take a look at the exact relay I just replaced because MX Control thinks that might be the issue. And yeah guys, thanks for watching, I will see you again tomorrow.